Hey, what's up guys, it's BenBonk and welcome back to the 30th Slimekeep Devlog. In this devlog, I added in a ton of new weapons to the game and made a bunch of tweaks to the slime pet and game flow. Also, if you're new here, Slimekeep is a fast-paced roguelike where you must kill and capture slimes to stop the corruption that has infected your land. Without further ado, let's get into it. First up, before working on new weapons, I wanted to work on something that has been long overdue in Slimekeep for years now, and that is shadows. Right now, slimes just don't 100% look like they're jumping off the ground, so it was finally time to fix that. I started off by watching this shadows tutorial by Guccio devs, and not long after I had this extremely realistic looking shadow. Just kidding, it looked terrible, so I wrote this function to get the shadow to move when the slime jumps, just using tweening. Now things were looking way better, but I still wasn't quite done with the shadow. With some feedback from my Discord, I tweaked the shadow's opacity and scale a little bit when the slime jumped to give a more realistic effect. So that right there is the new shadow system for all jumping slimes in the game, which is a massive visual clarity improvement in my opinion. Next up, I was looking for some things to work on, and I eventually settled on making more weapons for the game, as right now the game only has a few weapons. I haven't worked on any new ones for quite a long time. To get started, I made this post on my Discord server asking people to resend their old weapon concepts that they made in the past to potentially add to the game. The feedback on this post was crazy, and so many people posted their weapon concepts and even made new ones. So it's my goal to spend the next few days just grinding out adding a ton of new weapons to the game. For the first weapon I added, that worm sent this really cool fish weapon concept, so I got to work. I tweaked the fish sprite a bit and set the logic for this gun. Upon shooting, this fish releases a spray of 5 short-range bullets at random angles. This weapon has a very fast fire rate, so I think it'll be a great room clear and DPS weapon for the game. Next up, Northernite made a bunch of these really cool weapon concepts, but I really like this middle one called Ben. So I worked on adding it to the game and ended up with this. This weapon just shoots a somewhat high damage laser projectile with little accuracy and a pretty slow fire rate. So that right there is bang. Moving on, Sledger made this cluster grenade launcher concept, which in-game just fires this grenade that explodes after a few seconds or upon hitting an enemy. This is just another pretty solid room clear. And speaking of room clears, Rookrak made this concept for a ricochet gun that I added into the game. This gun just launches bouncy bullets around a room. It's a little buggy, but I'm still a fan of this gun, and I think it'd be pretty cool to line up neat shots. Rookrak also made this concept for a laser blaster gun, which looked really cool, but I was a little unsure on how to easily create lasers with my current weapon system, so instead I modified this concept a bit and combined it with a large laser projectile from one of Equipped Hat's concepts. In-game with this gun, the player must hold down the mouse button for a second without letting go to fire this massive, high-damage projectile. This required making a whole entire new hold-down mechanic for the weapon system, but I'm really happy with this one. Next, Beta made this marksman gun concept, which was really cool, just a little too complex for me to add. But I really like this gun artwork, and given that the projectile kind of looked like a slime ball, it reminded me that I always wanted to add a gun that uses the player's slime balls as ammo. So I used this opportunity to create this gun, and here you can see that in-game with the 0 slime balls, this gun has 0 ammo. But upon gaining slime balls, the player now has ammo and can shoot these medium damage bullets at the cost of 1 slime ball per bullet. I really like the uniqueness of this gun, but I also really like the uniqueness of this chalkram launcher by Equipped Hats. This launcher would have only 1 bullet, and upon shooting, the bullet would kind of act like a boomerang, returning to the player. So in-game, wherever the player would click, that's where the chalkram would move, and then after a few seconds, the chalkram would move back to the player. The chalkram could also move through enemies, making for a really neat and powerful weapon. Overall, I'm super happy with this one, and just how satisfying it feels to use. But I could use your help by having you wishlist Slimekeep on Steam. It takes 2 seconds to do so, and helps a lot. Link in the description. Anyways, for the next weapon, I just wanted to make something with a little less power compared to some of these other weapons. And Just Jussie made this flintlock concept, which seems pretty cool, as flintlocks are real weapons dating back to the 16th century, which are not known for being the most accurate per se. So in game, the flintlock shoots a mid-damage projectile very inaccurately. It can also only hold only 1 bullet at a time, which is not ideal, but I think it's still maybe a tad better than the starter weapon. Now something that is much more than a tad better compared to the starter weapon is this massive gun concept by Beta. They just resent this concept, which I thought looked super cool and powerful, but I still needed to think of what this gun could do to stand out. Eventually, I remembered that I created this very basic projectile mouse follow system years ago, and thought that implementing this mechanic for this weapon could be really neat. So I got to work, created this weapon, and now upon shooting, this gun will fire 6 projectiles that follow the player's mouse with a slight offset. These projectiles are decently high damage, making this one of the most powerful guns in the game. Maybe a little too powerful to be honest, I'll see. I also ended up naming the gun Terminal Shift. It means absolutely nothing, I just thought that it sounded kinda cool and ominous. Anyways, onto the next weapon, we had this Echo Gun concept by ZZT Bat. This gun would just fire these cool little echoes that would go through slimes and slow down over time, dealing tick damage to slime. So if you position yourself correctly to align with when the ring slows down, you can do quite a chunk of damage with this gun, giving it a bit of a learning curve, which I think is pretty cool. And something else I think is pretty cool is this Gatling Volt by Toasted Toast. Essentially, this weapon shoots a small clip of machine gun projectiles, and upon reloading with an empty clip, this weapon will shoot out a rocket with a deadly explosion. Not much else to say here, just a pretty solid weapon all around. And for the final weapon I added to the game right now, we had the Antimatter Rifle by him. I made it so that this weapon would shoot out small, mid to low damage projectiles, but with every third shot, the weapon would automatically fire this high damage antimatter disc thingy with an awesome explosion animation. This one's just really satisfying to use, but yeah, that's all the weapons for now. I'm super happy with all the unique ones I managed to add, so thank you to everyone who helped out with art and even people who made art that didn't get used. There were so many amazing concepts I didn't add, so maybe there'll be another time in the future where I can add some new weapons. Anyways, now we had a bunch of new weapons, but I still couldn't stand this core weapon reloading animation, which just looks really clunky, especially if I move my mouse away from the initial reload angle. So I started reworking this animation to be more fluid and ended up with this using tweening instead of a Unity animation. This was maybe a slight improvement, but the little weapon snap at the end of the rotation was just still killing me. So I added in another faster tween at the end to smooth out this snap, which helped a ton. And that's the new reload animation. Really happy with these changes. But moving on from the weapon system, I noticed this glitch in the slime pen where if the player released slimes into the pen and entered the house, the slimes would still be visible. And on top of that, these slimes would completely disappear when the player slept, granting the player no slime pet currency. To fix this, I started off by making sure the Slimeinator would remember currency throughout days. I also wanted to fix the pen slimes disappearing issue, so I decided to force them to disappear anyways as part of the Slimeinator. Essentially, I created this system where if the player opened the Slimeinator, and if there were slimes inside of the pen, there would be a brief pause, and these slimes would convert into the slime essence particle stuff and move towards the Slimeinator. This system mainly just fixed the issue of slimes disappearing, as now I forced them to essentially disappear, but it's also some really nice polish in my opinion. Moving on, I now wanted to focus on the slime pet, as this fella was quite a mess. There were just so many issues with him that I needed to fix, so I got to work. First up, upon sleeping, I noticed that the slime pet wouldn't teleport to the player's position, instead would just disappear essentially. This was a very simple fix, so now the slime pet can actually function past day 1. Next, I wanted to fix these slime pets' attack AI, as right now it's just super buggy and messy. So to fix many of these issues, I stopped the slime pet from following the player one side of a room, and instead just got him to constantly move towards and attack the closest enemy. Just this tweak alone made the slime pet already feel so much better, but I still had some more changes in mind, such as making the slime pet attack much more frequently to give him some more impact in rooms, as before he was just a little useless. Next, I realized that I never set the prices for the Slimeinator or the place where the player can purchase slime pet upgrades, so I just added in some temporary prices for now. Then I realized that the slime pet couldn't really attack most bosses in the game and would just cluelessly follow the player, so I gave him functionality to actually attack bosses. And speaking of bosses, I now had a few tweaks for them. First, I wanted bosses to be more rewarding to kill. Currently, they just give a few slime balls, which isn't the best reward in my opinion. So I upped the slime ball count quite a bit and also created a system for the boss reward chest to spawn a random weapon and upgrade that the player could pick up. In game, once opening this chest, tons of slime balls fly out, and after all that, you can see these 2 random pickups spawn, which is pretty neat. And one last tweak to bosses, I just updated the boss entry animation slide thingy to be this diagonal swipe effect. It would be nice to have dedicated boss intro slides, but this is just easier for now, I guess. Anyways, with that change done, I decided to return back to working on the slime pet. I've been meaning to create this last big upgrade on the slime pet skill tree for quite a while now, and I figured now would be a good time to do so. I started off by creating the art for this upgrade. I didn't know what the upgrade was going to fully be yet, but I knew I wanted to have a deadly look. So I made this radioactive symbol with a bunch of slime faces for the art. Then I set up a basic system where the player could purchase any 2 mid-tier upgrades to unlock this massive upgrade. I also decided on the concept for this upgrade, which would just be called Slime Doom, and would just buff the slime a ton all around, making him do more damage, attack faster, etc. As for purchasing this upgrade, I figured it'd be best to allow the player to purchase with any type of slime pet currency, as there are 5 different types of currency in the game. So I created this basic system with loops, which would just allow the player to purchase this upgrade using different types of currency. In game, you can see my currency here, and if I purchase some upgrades and then the big upgrade, you can see my currency decrease left from right to subtract a total of 200 currency from the player. Then I created the logic for the upgrade, which was pretty easy as I just buffed these slime's pre-existing systems all around. So if the player purchases this upgrade now, the slime pet will go kind of crazy in game. maybe a little too crazy. So I made some tweaks just to make the slime pet feel less clunky and more forceful with or without this upgrade, which has helped so much from before. So there were the tweaks and new upgrades for the slime pet. Moving down the list of gameplay fixes, it was now time to fix some issues with the chopper boss from the last devlog. First up, I got a million comments from you guys saying how this blade launcher attack needed a break animation for the blades. And I definitely agree. So I hopped into Sprite, created this simple animation, added it into Unity, and here's what it looked like. This definitely helped a lot, but you might still be annoyed by how the velocity of these blades can change, and I forgot to fix this in this devlog, but I'll make sure to fix it in the future. Anyways, the final small change for this boss was I added in this shadow that would hover around the boss so it actually looked like the boss was off the ground, which helped a ton. And those are the changes for now. I know it's not much, but I might come back to this boss later. The final few things I worked on were just a few things to fully wrap up the game loop to get the game ready for a beta release of Slimekeep. So for example, the first thing I added was this death screen that was planning to have a few stats, as well as let the player return home or restart the game. After that, I started working on the first version of a start screen for Slimekeep. I've always had the idea to let the player walk around the house in the start screen, and once they sleep, the game would actually start. So with this idea in mind, I got to work creating a new scene for the game. I basically just copied and tweaked a bunch of stuff from the actual game and ended up with this, where the player could just walk around and not much else. Then I gave the player the ability to sleep to actually start the game, and once adding this mechanic, I realized that the game really needed a loading screen to actually let the player know that the game was indeed loading. So I made this little loading animation in Sprite that I'm really happy with. But once trying to add this animation into the game, I realized that the current scene loading system in Slimekeep wouldn't support this, as I wasn't loading scenes asynchronously or in the background, if that makes any sense. So with the help of this awesome Brackeys tutorial, I reworked the loading system a bit and added in the loading animation. Now I think this loading system looks so much more professional, which is awesome to see. Because I just really liked how this looked, I decided to update the sleeping transition to use the same system, so that's pretty cool. And the final real change I made for this devlog was this basic start screen for the game, where the player could click and it would really take them to the start room. And with that done, the game was kind of wrapped up. Not done or anything close to that per se, but technically playable from start to finish. So I thought this would be a great opportunity to create a small, closed beta for people who have helped with the game's development so far to play and give feedback on the game, as well as finding bugs. So for the first time since April 2020, I built the game, or at least I tried to, before I was met with all these build errors. It took quite a bit of time to iron everything out, but eventually I had a working build of the game ready for playtesting. I'll let you know how this goes in the next devlog, but that's just going to be it for this devlog. It feels absolutely amazing to have an actual working build of the game for once. Just so you know, it's not available to the public right now, but I'll see you in the future. Anyways, that's all I have for now. Thanks for watching. Bye.